As heavy snow and bitter winds descend on Gaza, Afghanistan, and Lebanon, hundreds of displaced and refugee families struggle to survive the winter. Without adequate shelter or clothing, the harsh weather threatens lives. Donate towards AMA's Winter Rescue Campaign to provide the food, fuel, and shelter needed by families in Gaza, Lebanon, and Afghanistan to survive the elements and provide warmth to those in need.
It's official. Checkers Foods Cowie Park is our first food store with a halal butchery, bakery, and deli certified by NIHT, the National Independent Halal Trust. This will ensure high standards and ethical practices across our butchery, bakery, and deli from farm to table. So visit Checkers Foods Cowie Park for an exceptional shopping experience that keeps getting better and better.
The views and opinions expressed by the presenters and guests of Radio Al Ansar are not necessarily the views and opinions of Radio Al Ansar and the Al Ansar Foundation.
The Breakfast Rush, brought to you courtesy of the Willow Tin Group, at the forefront of innovation and one of the leading competitors in the South African FMCG market.
Wednesday, and there you go, Mike's working again. Wednesday morning, it is. Climate change is unfortunately a direct result of human activities, which means its impact will inevitably affect everybody on Earth. It's emerged as a major disruptor of global economies, threatening lives and livelihoods worldwide. If left unchecked, climate change could reverse decades of development progress and exacerbate existing inequalities. And joining us this morning is the Director of Business Development and Marketing at Interwaste, Kate Stubbs. Good morning and welcome back to Radio Al Ansar's Breakfast Rush.
Good morning. Good morning to you listeners.
Great to have you on the program. Now, folks, if you're listening in on radio, fantastic. You can also view on Facebook and on our live YouTube feed as well. Kate Stubbs, why is it important to emphasize waste management as a critical aspect of environmental sustainability?
I think it's important to, and we're talking about environmental education, to understand the impact that waste management has on the environment, but not only from the obvious, which is waste unmanaged causes pollution, but waste is wasted resources. And by having this take, make, waste mentality, we're continually utilizing so many precious resources that are not, so we are living in an unsustainable way. And so what we're trying to create is education. Once we need to manage our waste correctly so that we don't create pollution and degrade the environment that way, but also by creating less waste, we're putting less pressure on our biodiversity and our ecosystems, which are the very systems that we require to live and survive on the planet. So there are two sides of it that we urgently need to educate and bring awareness to everyone.
Can you provide an overview of South Africa's current waste management landscape and how it impacts our environment and economy?
Yeah, sure. South Africa, we produce about over 120 million tons of waste a year, half of that from our households and half through industry. And where we're really challenging, we have good legislation now. It's fairly new legislation, very forward-thinking. But understanding that legislation and enforcing it is a challenge, and we don't have enough waste management infrastructure and processes and systems to help that change. So there's a lot of progress is being made. People are learning to recycle. You're seeing exciting new solutions happening in terms of managing waste. And, our legislation is also driving behavior change. But the reality is, you just look at our waterways, our river systems, we still have too much pollution all around the country. So a lot more needs to happen in order to manage our waste more effectively.
Indeed. How have legislative frameworks like extended producer responsibility, sectoral emission targets, and the National Climate Change Adaptation Strategy influenced waste management practices in South Africa?
Yeah, there's lots of complex legislation. Just reading them out sounds very daunting. I mean, legislation is good because it forces industry and business to change the way they do things. So it has made a difference. I'll give you a good example is nearly every year, different types of waste are banned from being disposed to landfill. For instance, liquid waste in 2019 was banned from being disposed of in a dump site in a landfill. That forced any industry or anyone creating liquid waste to do something else with them. So it forces innovation. It looks at the waste management industry to find solutions to treat that liquid waste so that it doesn't create pollution. But even more importantly, you can actually reuse that wastewater. And that becomes a solution not only for managing the waste, but creating water, which is an incredibly precious resource, back into the system. So legislation is a good driver of behavior change. It sometimes needs to force that change faster, but it also brings awareness to why. So climate action, climate change, we're hearing about it. We are now seeing the impacts. You've seen in KZN, you've had floods, there are droughts. We are seeing these severe storms, which put a lot of pressure on people's lives, but also on infrastructure. So all these the legislative things, sort of processes in place are driving change, which is good.
Do you believe current policies are stringent enough to drive meaningful change in waste management, or are there gaps that need to be addressed?
The policies are good. The legislation is good. The education is lacking and the enforcement is lacking. So that's where the gap is. We have very sound policies and they're evolving, but we need to educate everyone on them. And then, there's no point having good policy if it's not enforced. So that's what we're calling for, more enforcement.
Absolutely. Now, if you've just tuned in, you're on the Breakfast Rush on Radio LNSR. We're speaking with the Director of Business Development and Marketing at Interwaste. Kate, what role does effective waste management play in protecting South Africa's biodiversity, particularly in areas most affected by illegal dumping or landfill overflow?
Yeah, so as I said, unfortunately, South Africa is running out of landfill airspace and we don't have enough infrastructure to process all the waste according to legislation. So we do see vast illegal dumping all over the country. They're not, every single town and city, wherever you drive, sadly, and it is increasing, wherever you go, you see illegal dumping. So for me, the whole country is challenged with illegal dumping. And what that does when you're dumping your waste is you're creating soil contamination, groundwater contamination, air contamination. You attract pests and rodents, and there could be social and health issues. So, unmanaged waste is a severe health risk, not only to the environment, but to humans. So managing your waste effectively, creating less pollution, is protecting the biodiversity. And that's what we're trying to create. Some of the education is understanding the human connection to our actions, to biodiversity, and to protecting the systems that we actually rely on to survive. So it is, people can think it's airy-fairy in protecting the environment and the planet, but it is real. Without water, we cannot live. And water is a really precious resource, but yet in South Africa specifically, we are a water-scarce country, yet we don't take good care of our water. And we're seeing the impacts of that right now. The same as, the vegetation and the plants we eat. So, it's up to each one of us to take accountability and responsibility for our actions and the waste that we're creating.
As a final question for this morning, are there specific industries or sectors in South Africa that have successfully monetized waste streams? And what lessons can others learn from them?
Yeah, so we try to talk about waste as a resource. So that's a great question. And a lot of industries or a lot of different waste streams are starting to be beneficiated. When we talk about monetize, it's a dangerous question because a lot of clients then say to us, well, how much are you going to pay me for my waste? Waste still needs to be collected, safely handled and processed. So it's not always for free. It's not always a direct profit, but you can use waste as a secondary resource. And we've seen it from, across the board in terms of even certain plastics. Your standards are your most of your paper is going back into reprocessing. Your glass is being reprocessed as a secondary resource. So, they're great case studies like that. And then, we talk about the circular economy, and that's about designing waste out of the system. And I've given examples of, plastic from certain medical plastics that are uncontaminated into school shoes for kids. There are wonderful NGO models like that, or, yogurt tubs into desks, into classrooms, into bricks. And those type of solutions are inspiring change. And that's what I want. I think if we can get people to think creatively and imaginatively about waste and look at waste and say, what can I do with it? Just like nature doesn't waste, that's the mindset that we need to create.
Absolutely. Kate, thank you so much for your time once again this morning. Always so very informative. Have yourself an absolutely amazing day going ahead.
Thank you so much. You too.
Bye-bye now. Why climate change education remains critical to fight, to secure our future. That was the topic of discussion. Director of Business Development and Marketing at Interwaste. That was Kate Stubbs lending her thoughts on the subject. Just encouraging us to, clean up after ourselves.
Absolutely. Reuse, recycle.
There you go. If your child decides to drop out of college or university without any justifiable reason, would you want them to pay back the money? Do you feel you need to be reimbursed for the expenses that you've incurred? That was a question that we put on air a little bit earlier on. Just one or two answers really quickly on WhatsApp from Anissa says, Salamu alaikum to the TBR team. Nishal and Naz definitely will expect that money back from my child. They must realize that it's hard-earned money put away for education. A hard-earned safety net from their parent, not just something that fell out of the sky.
Absolutely.
Anissa in Phoenix, man, Naz agrees with you.
Love it.
Hajra Habib says,
Nishal, about my child dropping out of university or college, no, I won't want them to pay me back because I wanted to give it to them. The best for their future if they choose. Something else, I let them live their life.
So two different opinions, both sides of the coin, yes and no. What is your opinion on the question? If you didn't hear the question again, if your child decides to drop out of college or university without any justifiable reason, would you want them to pay back the money? Do you feel that you need to be reimbursed for the expenses that you've incurred? Send your answers on WhatsApp to 060-904-1056. And somebody wants to know, why is Nishal wearing sunglasses inside the studio? Bright future ahead. Bright.
The Breakfast Rush, brought to you courtesy